talk to us about UConn. What can we expect to see in, I think, week 3 or 4 against with the Huskies coming to the big house?
Well, you can expect a Michigan win, as UConn has not beat an FBS team in quite some time. The last non-UMass FBS team that they beat was 2017 against Tulsa. This team's had 10 straight losing seasons. There's not a lot of hope, but there's not a lot of they can't go down any further than what they were last year. Last year they were 1-11, and they went 1-1 against FCS teams. They lost to Holy Cross, but they beat Yale later in the season. And their easiest FBS game last year was against UMass, but they lost 27-13. But the reason for new hope on UConn's campus is the arrival of a new head coach, and that's Jim Mora, who coached UCLA in what I would consider UCLA's glory years of the 21st century, which was back when they had Brett Hundley and Miles Jack and Anthony Barr, and they were getting 10 wins and appearing in Pac-12 championship games every once in a while. So Jim Mora, he had good offenses back at UCLA, as I mentioned, with Hundley and Miles Jack, who would play linebacker and running back, and some of those guys earlier. So I think that's one thing to look forward to if you're UConn. And they got a few transfers this offseason, which could make an immediate impact, including their starting quarterback, although he didn't have the best year. If you remember the Penn State-Iowa game when Sean Clifford got hurt, Taquan Roberson checked into that second half and played quarterback for Penn State. He will be UConn's likely starter this year. So Roberson's going to have a bit to learn from that Iowa experience in that environment, as he's going to be UConn's at quarterback.
Well, I will say this, that we talk all the time on here, what's it going to take for Jim Harbaugh to pull the trigger and possibly make the transition from a good starting quarterback in Cade McNamara to what could be a great starting quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. And now I'm thinking it's finally dawned on me. They're playing UConn, and if Cade McNamara throws one incompletion, I think that's going to be enough to say, you know what, you can't cut it. That's just not acceptable. Yeah, this is a bad football team.
Yeah. And it's just interesting for Jim Mora. I mean, I would imagine with his reputation that I have no idea, but I don't think when he was on one of the shows on a pretty regular basis, I don't think it was clear that he wanted to continue coaching. I guess I say all that to say I would think he would go to a better situation than UConn.
I mean, how did that call go with Jim Mora's agent?
Yes,
like
that was going to be my question.
He calls him, "Hey Jim, hey look, I know that you've been interested in getting back in the coaching ranks. Look, UConn called. Like, if you're Jim, how do you not just hang up and be like, you know what? Why are you wasting my time with this? How did because last time I checked, I don't think UConn has the deepest pockets to overpay for a coach. So it's like, if you're Jim, it's like, how do you look at that offer sheet and yeah, you know what, this sounds like a great opportunity to get back into coaching football. I just look, when you go 1-11 and you're at the state of UConn's University of Connecticut football, you're pretty much, wouldn't be shocked that they have posters around campus having open walk-on tryouts, trying to find any talent they can, because I'm not trying to just rag on them, but it's just it's a really, really sad state of affairs. The biggest probably exposure they probably have gotten is, what was it, 2 summers ago when the Aaron Hernandez documentary was out and they brought up his brother playing there, about Aaron Hernandez potentially playing there himself. That's the last time I really thought even heard about UConn football was when that came out. Just touch on the fact that their family was connected to the program, right? So other than that, you really don't hear much about UConn at all. And Michigan probably is going to have a better chance of getting better practicing during the week than they will playing that game. Playing the game is going to be okay. They'll be better off playing a full game versus UConn and then doing an inter-squad scrimmage afterwards, saying okay, we didn't get better today at all. So we're going to stay here We're going to practice against each other.
Yeah,
I'm
it's a day
sorry.
off. It's a day off. It's like, oh, we don't have practice today. Good. We're playing UConn. But yeah, I gotta take off. But there's one thing I want to hear from Steve, and you guys, Des, Dre, you guys know you take the show to whatever point you want. So just I will be in the background shutting it down whenever you need to, but go for 2 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, whatever you want to do. But yeah, to Dre's point, when I heard Jim Mora got the job at UConn, I was like, what? What's he doing? This is the type move, this guy coached in an NFC championship game. Like you mentioned, his days at UCLA. He had a nice little run at UCLA. They could only hope that Chip Kelly would have come anywhere close to matching what Jim Mora did at UCLA. He had a nice tenure there. It wasn't great, but it was strong. And, this is the type career move that a coach usually makes that's got his kind of resume. Like when they're like 70 and they want a job that it doesn't really matter how well they do, but they want to coach still. And they can kick their feet up and be like, I still want to coach, but it doesn't really matter. And I don't need the money. And so whatever they pay me is fine. And I was astounded. So, Steve, do you have any background? Has he made any statements as to
why the heck he took that phone call?
He's feeling philanthropic. He just wants to give back and give back to the game. It has to be something like that.
Maybe he loves the Northeast. I don't know. East Coast.
Maybe. Clearly loves snow, right? Right, Mark? In Connecticut.
He must love the snow. Yeah, got to get back to that snow. I don't know.
Maybe it's an end to ESPN. I don't know. Maybe he's like,
he was already on ESPN.
I mean, I just like when I'm just in terms of like the selling point, like, they fly Jim in, I hope they flew him in. They fly Jim in and it's like, hey, Jim, welcome. Let's walk you around campus, and it's not like it's like a rich tradition in the back that you can really point to, like, hey, we used to be this. Right. So, it's just like I'm trying to think of the selling point.
Maybe Darren Orlovsky was there. I mean,
literally, like, dude,
the
last time I have seen a Connecticut football game. It was 2006 or 7 when they played at the Motor City Bowl here in Detroit versus Toledo.
Was it riveting?
It was football. All right, wait, I'm sorry, Steve. Please.
Oh, I can still hear. I got to cut in on that one because I got too big for you, Dre. Yeah. Number one, Michigan needed. Steve will remember this, and you should remember this. Michigan needed a last-second field goal to beat UConn in 13 or 14.
Oh,
Steve.
yeah.
Yes,
24-21,
UConn, wasn't it?
I think it was before Harbaugh. Yeah, it was in the Hoke era. It was. I think. Yeah, 13 or 14 sounds right.
And then my other one is, let's understand that UConn has reached a Fiesta Bowl in this decade.
2010 Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma, which was the downfall of the Big East, I would say, because that was the game where people realized that the Big East did not deserve an automatic BCS bid anymore. And that basically was the start of the end of the Big East, was that 2010 Fiesta Bowl that featured UConn and Oklahoma. I think the final score was like 48-20, but it wasn't even that close if you watched the game.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting hire with Jim Mora agreeing to that. Maybe his family's from Connecticut or something, and it just, worked well. And the missus said absolutely. And who knows?
Yeah,
maybe they didn't have to move.
I was breaking up earlier, but I can tell you the connection that got Jim Mora to UConn, and UConn's defensive coordinator was Lou Spanos, who was their interim head coach last year. He was the defensive coordinator under Jim Mora at UCLA. So Mora's reuniting with Spanos, his former defensive coordinator. So that was the connection. Coaching's all about connections. When you just look at coaching staffs, there's always a connection in there that explains everything about every coaching hire or decision. So that's what really drove Mora back to Stores.
That's interesting.
It's a challenging job. It's like when you play NCAA 14, you kind of want to start with that one-star team and see how far you can go with them. And
their prestige is at 1 star. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Coaches like a challenge. I mean, John Gruden had a comfortable job in Monday Night Football, and he was making, I think, 10 million something a year, and he wanted to go back and coach the Raiders, have a high stress job with that. The coaches just are a different breed. They have a different level of competitiveness that they have to get. And you see so many coaches go from the booth, like Bruce Arians, I think, spent 1 year at CBS before going back to the field. I think there's just a certain competitive edge that they have where they have to be coaching at all times. And I think Mora is kind of has that right now when he wants that challenge of rebuilding a UConn program where there's really nothing to lose.
I think his biggest challenge is just like finding ways to stay motivated in the film room after every week. He's just gonna have to find ways, to I mean, all jokes aside, I do commend taking the opportunity, but it's you're literally building the program from the ground up with not a lot of real prestige to kind of lean on, and well, I will say that one thing that can really aid Jim Mora or any coach that really takes a tough opportunity like this is the impact of the transfer portal. Now, because now you can get kids who are flame outs at other programs or are solid to good players, and they just can't find the opportunities at especially the quarterback position, right? Maybe you get a career transfer. Look. This kid, one guy in mind, I'm just using him as an example. He definitely is. He definitely has foibles. Adrian Martinez. I think about a kid like that, very talented kid. Big experience in college. Played 3-4 years as a starter. And he's in a transfer portal. And maybe you can land a kid like that for your school versus your opponents. He can do very well, right? So I will say that will be something that I'm sure Jim's going to hit hard. It sounds like he already has, and he should probably continue because I think it's a little bit easier now to possibly luck into some good players or hitting gems with the transfer portal than it was in years past to make a quicker impact.
Yeah, they already landed several transfers from Old Dominion who are projected to start. Marquez Bembry, who is a former linebacker at Kentucky, should start alongside Jackson Mitchell and Ian Swenson. That's their most loaded position group is their linebacking core. UConn's offense was atrocious last year. Their defense was pretty bad too and ranks at the bottom of almost every metric, as a 1-11 team should. But UConn's defense did show signs of promise. This team almost beat Wyoming last year. The Wyoming team that beat Kent State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. That was probably one of the crazier results of the year. Was that? What are you laughing at?
I'm sorry. It was a combination of you saying they almost beat Wyoming. That was the Idaho Potato Bowl. It was a chain reaction just hearing it all in one.
Wyoming was a decent team last year. Xavier Valladay and Sean Chambers. They had a lot of talent in that Wyoming team, and they beat Kent State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. They had Levi Williams, the quarterback, I think ran for 200 yards in that game alone. But UConn did a pretty good job of stopping that Wyoming offense last year, and they lost at the very end of the game, I think like 24-22. So they showed signs of promise. They put on a few points against Houston and UCF and made those games somewhat competitive. They didn't lose like at the beginning of the year. UConn went their first 10 quarters of the season without scoring a single point. And I think they lost the first game to Fresno State like 48 or 45-0. I remember that was on week 0. I looked at that team and I said, this team doesn't look like they practiced football in the year, which they did not play. Remember, they did not play in the 2020 pandemic season.
Yeah.
Right.
So it looked like a team that had not practiced in a while, but it seemed like they made tangible progress at the end of the season where they went from the complete bottom of the barrel to a team that can maybe eke out a win against another poor opponent. At the beginning of the season, it looked like the team was completely hopeless, but they did get that one win over Yale, which FCS wins shouldn't really mean too much, but it was UTEP. You made a bowl game last year. UTEP in 2020, that pandemic season, they were getting FCS wins, and that was progress for them. So anytime you get in a victorious locker room, I think that can build the momentum, and you teach these players how to win. If you look at their schedule next year, I think they play Utah State on week 0. That's a loss. Utah State won the Mountain West last year, incredibly coached team by Blake Anderson. And then week 2, you have an FCS team in Central Connecticut State. That should be a win. If UConn loses that game, they should be humiliated. So they should have a win going into that Michigan game, which I just think can do a lot to boost your confidence. But they're not going to compete with Michigan. They're not going to compete with a lot of teams on their schedule. And they'll probably keep playing multiple FCS teams a year, play UMass every year, and those will be their best chances at getting wins.
So you're saying we don't have to worry about an App State disaster. We're good. We're clear for that.
No, App State, when Michigan played them, I think they were like 2-time reigning FCS champions. And
Yeah.
App State's been even better since getting to the FBS. I still remember that game on Big Ten Network. But no, with UConn, you do not have to worry a thing at all. Like, I was on here talking about Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and I don't think you have to worry that much about Hawaii, even with all the changes that have gone there this offseason. And UConn, I think, would probably lose by over 3 touchdowns to that Hawaii team.
Yeah.
Michigan has
a
Hawaii conference this year.
Yeah. Look, trust me. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I think the Michigan non-conference schedule is a joke. And it's going to help their record look nice and pretty, but in terms of preparing them for the meat of their schedule against the higher quality opponents, I don't think it's going to do them well at all. And what I will say for where UConn is, what I think you really want to see with programs like UConn, Hawaii, especially UConn, it's just fight. You want guys to show good character, to show good fight. If you can't be the most talented team, at least try to make the least mistakes, as penalty-free football as you can. Those are things I think Coach Mora should and will be looking for. How can we just play the cleanest football we can, competitive football, and the rest will kind of play itself out. And that's what I'll be looking for, watching that game. It's like, okay, because to be honest, when Michigan plays opponents like that, it's hard for me to pull a lot out of that in terms of really gauging how good Michigan is, because, it's just not a lot of resistance on the opposite side. But for UConn, you want to see, certain guys compete and stuff like that. And maybe, you can find, some hitting gems that, hey, maybe this kid can be an impactful guy for our program. Unfortunately, now I will say is that you almost don't want kids to be too good early in your program because of transfer portal, because then they'll leave, right? I mean, look at Jordan Addison, impact, really good season at Pittsburgh, played with a first-round pick quarterback, and now he's at USC, and Pitt was just in the Peach Bowl, correct?
Yes.
So it's like, that's also very scary for a coach like Jim Mora, because now if you have a good kid, he may leave.
Mm-hmm. You won't want to hang around, especially if you have another, 1-11, 2-10 season. It's like, man, if I can play and other schools, potentially want me, or I can go somewhere else, I'm definitely hitting the transfer portal. So it's a very different environment that these coaches have to deal with now. And it's very different because a lot of guys resisted the transfer because they didn't want to sit out a year. And now with it, you having the one-time transfer rule, you have to not only recruit more guys to come in, but you also have to recruit guys who are literally on your roster, enrolled in your school. So it's different, but we'll see what happens with Jim Mora. Have faith in him as a coach. I just wonder if this situation is, I don't want to say insurmountable, but just may take such a long time to rebuild and get there, that he may just say, hey, listen, man, this is a lot more than I really wanted to deal with at this point in my career. So we will see what happens.
Here's one thing you want to get out of the Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn games. And I want to use Penn State as an example and UConn's quarterback as an example of this. You need to develop depth, because when you don't develop that depth and you're suddenly getting a ton of injuries like Penn State did in that Iowa game last year, their starting defensive tackle PJ Mustipher went down. They had a couple secondary pieces go down. Their quarterback Sean Clifford went down. And when you're on a game in an environment like that, in a road environment against Iowa, and you're running out of bodies to put on the field, you need guys who have been in that in-game experience, because you cannot no matter how hard you practice, you cannot replicate just the in-game experience there. I don't care if it's against Colorado State or UConn, that experience is invaluable. So Taquan Roberson, UConn's quarterback, was thrown into that Iowa game last year without too much collegiate experience, and Penn State struggled to even snap the ball to the point where their right guard had to turn around and tell the quarterback when the snap was coming because the crowd was so loud and the defense was so tenacious, and Penn State was in panic mode in that game. And they blew a 2-touchdown lead to Iowa, and they lost in the second half just because the offense couldn't produce enough to get going. They were basically punting from their own end zone and giving Iowa the ball at the 50-yard line every time. And even with an offense like Iowa's that wasn't really that good last year, they still eventually won just because they had the opportunities for that. So you want to get in these reps. You want to train these backups for this game. In these types of games. So when they're needed, because injuries are inevitable in football, you're going to need those guys later in the season. So that is one benefit of having games where you're going to have a lot of garbage time experience against Colorado State, Hawaii, and most definitely UConn.
Yeah, well, Dez doesn't believe in that playing at Iowa is tough. That's a little thing that we have. I really respect playing at Iowa, but
I don't think it should be looked upon as a place that just you cannot win at Iowa. If you're the better team, go in and win. That's my thoughts on it. So